A shocked and devastated Diddy spotted at the home where his ex suddenly and mysteriously
When she put out those pictures of the dude pulling his pants down, and it looked like some gay act that was going on, he got on the phone.
Nobody pressed play expecting silence. But that's exactly what happened. A hush. The kind that creeps in when people realize a documentary isn't just telling a story, it's reopening one. A new project connected to the legacy of Kim Porter dropped, and within minutes the internet did what it does best. It connected dots, replayed old clips, and started asking questions nobody in Hollywood seemed eager to answer. Then two names hit the timeline like gasoline on a match. Quincy Brown and 50 Cent, not whispering, not hinting. Reacting loudly to what the doc suggests, implies, and recontextualizes. And suddenly the conversation wasn't about nostalgia or tribute anymore. It was about power, control, and who really gets to shape the narrative when the cameras turn off. This isn't a courtroom verdict. This is a culture moment. A clash between legacy and suspicion, between curated images and uncomfortable questions. And when Diddy becomes the center of a debate fueled by a documentary tied to Kim Porter, the internet doesn't wait for conclusions. It builds theories. Reality TV wishes it had tension like this. The Kardashians could never. Because when docs start suggesting and reactions start confirming feelings, the fallout doesn't need proof to explode. It just needs attention. The documentary didn't come in screaming accusations. That's what made it unsettling. It arrived calmly, dressed in reflection and memory, carrying the tone of something meant to honor a legacy rather than detonate it. But anyone who's watched enough documentaries knows the real danger isn't what gets said, it's what gets reframed. And the moment viewers realized this film was quietly rearranging familiar pieces, the internet leaned forward, because reframing changes everything. Moments that once felt settled suddenly felt incomplete. Certain scenes lingered just long enough to feel intentional. Certain questions were asked and then left hanging in the air like smoke. Nothing was outright stated, nothing was proven. But the discomfort was undeniable. The kind of discomfort that doesn't shout, it whispers. And whispers travel farther than the reaction started when Quincy Brown acknowledged the documentary publicly. His tone alone shifted the entire conversation. He didn't accuse. He didn't dramatize. He didn't jump into speculation. He responded with weight, measured, personal, and visibly careful. That mattered. Because when someone closely tied to a legacy reacts with seriousness instead of dismissal, the audience doesn't hear rumor. They hear permission. Permission to rewatch. Permission to question. Permission to connect dots they were told not to. Look at before. That was the spark. Suddenly the doc wasn't just a film. It was a lens. Viewers started replaying old interviews, re-examining timelines, and revisiting moments they'd filed away as industry noise. Not because the documentary told them to, but because it suggested there might be more beneath the surface. And suggestion is far more powerful than accusation. Then 50 Cent entered the conversation. If Quincy's reaction was solemn, 50's was surgical. He didn't break down the documentary frame by frame. He didn't issue a manifesto. He amplified the reaction to it. A caption here, a pointed remark there. The kind of commentary that doesn't need explanation because it relies on the audience to finish the thought themselves. That's when things went from reflective to volatile. Because 50 Cent doesn't just comment, he curates chaos.
His posts didn't say, "This is true." They said, "Look again."
And when someone with a long history of public feuds and sharp commentary tells the internet to look again, people don't ask for instructions. They start digging. The sarcasm online was immediate and ruthless. Memes compared the documentary to opening a family album and finding pages missing. Others joked that it came with pause and rethink energy. Reaction channels rushed to upload breakdowns that were less about evidence and more about vibes. And vibes, in internet culture, are treated like facts. But beneath the jokes, something serious was happening. The narrative around Diddy, carefully built over decades, felt suddenly unstable, not destroyed, not disproven, just questioned. And when a public figure's story shifts from admiration to interrogation, The ground under them starts to move. What fueled the fire wasn't a single claim. It was alignment, a documentary that reframed history. A sun reacting with gravity. A longtime critic amplifying discomfort. The internet didn't need proof. It had pattern recognition. Fans pushed back hard, and that resistance only kept the story alive. Supporters argued the reactions were exploitative, disrespectful, or motivated by old beefs. Critics accused defenders of protecting power instead of truth. The divide was instant and emotional, which meant the algorithm loved it. Division is oxygen. Every response became content. Silence from some was treated as strategy. Pushback from others was read as confirmation of insecurity. Even neutral takes were labeled suspicious. The documentary stopped being about its actual footage and became about context, who was speaking, who wasn't, and why this moment felt different. And the why now question wouldn't go away. Was this timing? Coincidence? Cultural reckoning? Internet opportunism? The truth mattered less than the moment, because moments don't wait for clarity. They demand engagement, and engagement creates momentum. By the end of the week, nobody was talking about cinematography or editing choices. They were talking about implication, about how stories change when the narrator isn't in the room, about whether reactions themselves can function as exposure without ever crossing legal lines. This wasn't a verdict. This wasn't confirmation. This was a fracture in the narrative. And fractures don't need to be wide to be dangerous. They just need to exist long enough for people to start looking through them. Because once the audience feels invited to question a legacy, it doesn't stop at the documentary. It keeps pulling at threads until something either unravels or snaps back harder than before. Once the reactions started stacking up, the documentary stopped being a piece of media and turned into a cultural accelerant. Clips weren't just shared, they were interpreted, shortened, captioned, framed with certainty that the film itself never claimed. That's how the internet works when suggestion meets appetite. It doesn't wait for answers. It builds momentum. Reaction channels clocked in immediately. Thumbnails went darker. Titles got louder. Everyone promised a breakdown, which usually meant an hour of reading body language, pausing mid-sentence, and assigning meaning to silence. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A doc that spoke softly ended up creating the loudest conversation of the week. Quincy Brown's measured tone kept getting replayed, not for what he said, but for how he said. Viewers dissected pauses like punctuation marks. They treated restraint as revelation. The internet decided that seriousness itself was evidence, not of guilt, but of gravity. And gravity pulls attention whether it's deserved or not. Then, 50 Cent did what he does best. He let the internet finish the sentence. A caption here, a repost there. No full explanations. No legal claims. Just enough implication to keep the algorithm awake at night. His commentary didn't assert facts. It validated suspicion. And suspicion spreads faster than confirmation ever could. Memes exploded because humor is how people metabolize discomfort. Screenshots were paired with captions about reading between the frames and watching with new eyes. Some joked that the documentary came with a built-in pause button for second thoughts. Others said it felt like finding footnotes in a family history book nobody wanted to open. The jokes landed because they gave people permission to keep watching without admitting. Why do celebrity-adjacent reactions made things messy without saying much at all? Likes appeared and disappeared. Vague posts about truth, time, and healing floated across timelines with no names attached. Silence from certain corners got interpreted as strategy. Noise from others was treated as self-defense. In the absence of clarity, everything became a clue. Fans split hard. Supporters argued the entire wave was irresponsible, pointing out that implication isn't evidence and reaction isn't proof. Critics fired back that powerful people rarely get questioned unless something cracks first. The argument wasn't about what was true. It was about who deserves scrutiny. And that debate is tailor-made for endless engagement. Pop culture comparisons went feral. People said the situation made prestige docuseries look tame. Others compared it to opening a vault and realizing half the labels were missing. A few joked, That Hollywood was allergic to straight answers and this doc triggered the rash. The comparisons weren't just jokes. They reframed the moment as a turning point instead of a release. What kept the story alive was repetition with variation. The same clips, reshared with new captions, new tones, new conclusions. Each repost nudged perception a fraction of an inch. No single share mattered. Collectively, they shifted the floor. And through all of it, the most powerful force wasn't outrage. It was uncertainty. People weren't convinced. They were curious. Curiosity is sticky. It makes viewers rewatch. It makes them scroll comments. It makes them argue. And arguing in internet terms is oxygen. The doc didn't need to accuse. The ecosystem did that work for it. The conversation drifted from, what did the film show? To, why does this feel different now? Timing became the subtext. Cultural mood mattered. The audience wasn't just consuming a documentary. It was processing a broader moment where power, legacy, and narrative control feel negotiable again. When that mood hits, even cautious reactions feel explosive, pushback intensified, and paradoxically helped. Every defense became another reason to watch the clip again. Every denial invited another thread. Every call for patience turned into a countdown. The internet doesn't reward restraint. It rewards heat. By mid-cycle, the doc itself felt secondary. The reactions were the headline. The commentary was the content. The audience wasn't asking for a verdict. It was asking for the next move. Would there be clarifications? More reactions? Silence? Silence, as always. Read loudest. And that's when the tone shifted from speculation to stakes. Because when narratives harden, they start affecting reputations whether or not anything is proven. Brands get cautious. Collaborators pause. Publicists prepare statements they hope they won't need. None of this is announced. It's felt in delays, in distance, in the careful wording of future conversations. The internet sensed that shift too. The jokes thinned. The commentary sharpened. People started talking about consequences without naming them. About legacy without defining it. About truth without agreeing on what that even means. The most telling sign? The conversation stopped asking if and started asking what next. Because once a story reaches that phase, it's no longer about the documentary. It's about the aftershocks. About how implication changes perception. About how reaction becomes a force in its own right. And with momentum like that, resolution doesn't come from facts alone. It comes from time, and time in a viral cycle is the one thing nobody has patience for. When the noise finally softened and the timeline found something else to argue about, the real effects started showing up, not as headlines but as hesitation. That's how moments like this do damage. They don't explode and vanish, they recalibrate. And after the documentary and the reactions that followed, the story around Diddy didn't collapse. It tilted. Outrage would have been easier. Outrage burns fast and leaves clean lines. What lingered instead was uncertainty, and uncertainty is a slow leak that drains confidence over time. People didn't suddenly decide what to believe. They decided to watch differently. Interviews were reheard. Old praise felt conditional. Celebrations came with a quiet asterisk. That's the cost of implication, the reactions that kicked this off, especially the measured gravity from Quincy Brown and the pointed amplification from 50 Cent continued to echo even after the clips stopped circulating. Not because new information surfaced, but because the frame had shifted. And once a frame changes, everything inside it looks different. What people underestimated was how quickly perception becomes policy. No press releases announced it. No brands made public statements, but the industry felt the tremor. Conversations slowed. Plans became, we'll revisit. Timelines stretched. Caution replaced enthusiasm. That's not cancellation. That's containment. Containment doesn't accuse. It waits. Public perception followed the same pattern. Fans didn't flip overnight. They splintered. Some doubled down, defending legacy with ferocity and calling the entire moment opportunistic. Others didn't attack. They just asked more questions. And in culture, questions are heavier than insults. Insults can be dismissed. Questions demand answers, or at least patience. The documentary itself became less important than what it unlocked. Viewers stopped debating scenes and started debating power. Who gets to tell which stories? Who controls the edit when the subject isn't present? And whether reaction, not allegation, can reshape a narrative all on its own. That last part mattered most because nobody proved anything. What changed was the comfort level. The ease with which people accepted a single, polished version of history was gone. The audience didn't replace it with certainty. They replaced it with vigilance, and vigilance is sticky. It doesn't trend. It lingers. Silence became louder than statements. Each non-response was read as strategy by some and prudence by others. Every move carried subtext. And once subtext becomes the currency, even neutrality feels like a decision. Meanwhile, the conversation around Kim Porter took on a different gravity. The doc didn't just prompt debate about power, it recentered memory. And memory, when shared publicly, becomes sacred ground. That raised the stakes. Criticism felt sharper. Defenses felt more emotional. Nobody wanted to be seen as disrespecting a legacy, which made the entire debate more volatile. That volatility reshaped relationships in the public eye. Old alliances were reinterpreted. Past tensions were reread as foreshadowing. History itself became flexible, edited by mood and moment. The internet didn't need new facts. It had new angles. And angles change outcomes. Creators felt it too. Commentary shifted from jokes to caution. Thumbnails got darker. Language softened, then sharpened again. Everyone wanted engagement, but nobody wanted to cross the invisible line into definitive claims. That balancing act, provocative without prosecutorial, became the tone of the moment, because the risk wasn't being wrong. The risk was being certain. As days passed, the story stopped trending, but it didn't disappear. It settled into the background as context. The kind that resurfaces the next time a name pops up, the next time a clip goes viral, the next time a legacy moment arrives. Context doesn't shout. It waits. This is how reputations change now. Not with one catastrophic event, but with a series of reframes that make people lean back instead of lean in. Admiration becomes assessment. Celebration becomes calculation. And once that switch flips, it's hard to unflip. The internet moved on, as it always does. Another doc. Another feud. Another scandal begging for attention. But the afterimage remained. The questions didn't get answered. They got filed. And filed questions have a habit of resurfacing when timing aligns. That's the final twist here. This wasn't an expose that closed a chapter. It was a moment that reopened margins. Margins are where doubt lives, where narratives soften, where power is still intact, but no longer untouchable. And in a culture that thrives on momentum, even a small shift in touchability matters. Nothing definitive happened. Everything consequential did, because once an audience starts asking what else, instead of what's next, the story isn't over. It's just waiting for the next catalyst, another reaction, another reframe, another quiet moment that invites loud interpretation. And this is where the real conversation starts, because if you think this documentary moment was just another clip that trended and vanished, you're missing the bigger picture. Stories like this don't explode, they settle. They change how people watch, how they listen, and how they remember. One reframe, one reaction, and suddenly a legacy feels different without anyone ever saying the quiet part out loud. So now, it's on you. Jump into the comments and say what everyone's thinking but arguing around. Do you believe the reactions from Quincy Brown and 50 Cent simply reflected discomfort the audience already felt? Or do you think the internet ran way too far with implication and speculation? Was this documentary a respectful revisit of memory? Or did it open doors that were never meant to be pushed? If this breakdown made you pause, rewind, or side-eye your screen, smash that like button like it owes you money and tried to dodge the bill. No gentle taps. No sympathy clicks. Hit it with intention so the algorithm knows this isn't background noise. This is a conversation people actually care about. And if you're not subscribed yet, fix that immediately. Because when documentaries spark debates, when reactions shift narratives, and when culture starts questioning power instead of celebrating it. This is where everything gets unpacked with clarity, sarcasm, and zero fear of uncomfortable questions. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next reaction wave, the next reframe, or the next moment when a quiet story suddenly becomes the loudest topic in the room, because scandals don't always come with accusations. Exposure doesn't always need proof. And Fame Blueprint is always here to break down how narratives are really built and quietly rewritten.